You've learned about it in school and you realized you have an interest, but you want to know more. What am I talking about? Your career cluster. I would love to learn more about your career cluster. Please drop in the chat what your career cluster is. Hello, everyone. I am Sarah Ramonko, your SkillsUSA National College Post-Secondary President, and my career cluster is Business Management and Administration. My role is to moderate this discussion, and I am so excited to introduce you all to our 4 panelists that encompass the areas of business management and administration and marketing. Our first panelist, Hans Ziegler, the Chief Financial Officer at the management consulting company Springer Lawson & Associates, is a proven business executive that has led accounting, finance, and sales support teams in both private and government sectors. His ability to bridge the communication gap between the various functional business disciplines has enabled him to succeed in both financial and operational assignments. Hans's ability to increase enterprise value earned him Smart CFO by CEO Magazine in 2009 and 2014. Our second panelist is Ann Unger, and she is the head of global marketing communications at Puma, focuses on developing integrated communications in the US for Puma's key products and campaigns, from PR to social to paid media. In addition to her US-specific role, she oversees global social and influencer strategy for the brand. Before working there for more than 9 years, Ann worked at the Boston Red Sox at the Red Sox Foundation and on the marketing team. Our third panelist is Major Ross H. McKnight, and he is the Chief of the Air Force National Events Branch, Strategic Marketing Division, Headquarters Air Force Recruiting Service, Joint Base San Antonio in Randolph, Texas. He leads a 16-person Air Force and contractor team that is responsible for planning and executing marketing strategies supporting 3 groups, 28 squadrons, and over 1,200 field recruiters across the nation to determine the best event marketing campaigns to inspire, engage, and recruit the next generation of American airmen. He manages all Air Force level sponsorships, mobile recruiting assets, and promotional items, which includes activation strategies and digital data capture, all valued at over $19 million for over 250 events per year. Our final panelist is Tae Kang, and he is the program manager for the Harbor Freight Tools for Schools Prize for Teaching Excellence, and he collaborates with partners including real-world scholars and anchors operations and research projects. He was previously a middle school studies and math teacher at St. John Chrysostom School in Inglewood, California, and a high school religion teacher at St. Elizabeth High School in Wilmington. Tae is passionate about education policy, and he hopes to impact classrooms throughout the country. Wow. So after hearing those intros, I'm sure you're just as excited as I am to dig deeper into the career journeys of these professionals. And I'm sure that you have all started thinking of some awesome questions. And we would love to hear those questions. Throughout the event, please submit your questions using the Q&A feature. So one question that I'm sure that is on all the students' minds right now is, what made you all become interested in your career area? And let's start with you.
Sure. Hey guys, so nice to meet you. Albeit virtually, it's great to be here. So I guess, honestly, I kind of fell into it. I followed my passion of sports. I was an athlete growing up. I played soccer through college, and I honestly just knew that I wanted to do something that I was passionate about. So that's frankly what has driven me throughout my career. I was, very fortunate to get to work for the Boston Red Sox, which is, of course, a first-class organization. And I then transitioned after that experience, wanting to kind of explore a different area within retail, but at a global sports company. So I think I'm in sports for a while. I still feel passionate about it. So I would say that's kind of what landed me in what I'm doing now.
Thank you for sharing that, Anne. Let's move on to Tae. How did you become interested in your career area?
Hi, this is a great question. And again, thanks so much for being part of this panel, or for inviting me to be part of this panel, and for all of your attendance today. For me, I've always been passionate about education. And, as Sarah read in my bio, I served as a teacher for 4 years. And what I really loved was impacting the students in front of me. But as my goals and aspirations grew, I really wanted to impact classrooms across the country. And, I felt that working for a foundation, working for a philanthropic initiative would provide me this opportunity to not just serve the students in front of me, but help students and teachers across the city, across the state, and across the country. So that's kind of what been my motivating goal for joining philanthropy and foundation work. And I'm a Los Angeles Dodgers fan. So thank you for Mookie Betts and and just helping the Los Angeles Dodgers win their first World Series in 32 years.
Thank you for sharing that. So it sounds like both of you kind of had something near the beginning of your life that played kind of a role. So for Anne, it was sports, kind of leading up to that career now. And then for you, it was kind of education. So it's kind of cool to see how those played a role, in the later areas. So let's
Absolutely.
move on to Major Ross McKnight.
Hi, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. Appreciate the time. So for me, it's a little bit different in the military, and that I kind of almost fell into the job. I'm a systems engineering undergrad from the Air Force Academy, went and got a master's, but most of my MBA, but most of my experience or career field is in program or project management, weapon acquisition, aircraft acquisition, cost, performance, schedule, risk balancing type things. But the way the military works is I've been fortunate enough to get to experience and do different things along the way. And so, first assignment was in weapons acquisition, doing production line type development for a missile. And then I went and did space operations and ground architecture development. And it just happened that the time I was moving to my next assignment, the job in marketing was available, and I happened to have a connection in that area from a former boss I used to work with, and he said it'd be great at this job, and I took it, and I've loved it ever since. I mean, I have an interest in sports and all the different things that we sponsor, and I'm also passionate about the Air Force, and I've really enjoyed my career. But marketing was a very natural overlap from what I did in terms of balancing cost, schedule, performance, and risk. It just happened to be that instead of performance being very, very technical from like a weapon system or an aircraft system, it was a little bit more in the emotional side of connecting to your audience. Not that we still don't have detailed metrics to track for performance measuring of our marketing investment, but that knowing how to connect and what will connect with your audience was a little bit more on the less technical side of things for me, which pushed me outside my comfort zone from a systems engineer perspective. But it's been a blast, and just have enjoyed it ever since.
That's awesome to hear, especially the passion that you have. It sounds like all of you so far, really have that passion for your job. And, hearing that, especially for me too, because, this is what I'm interested in, these areas. And so it's just very, very inspiring for me to hear that. So now let's move on to Hans. How did you become interested in your area?
So it's great to be here, first of all. Unlike Tay, Ross, and Ann, I don't have a logical path that I can tell you all about that got me to where I am. I think as I was growing up in school, I kind of, I always did better in math and, the quantitative kinds of classes, struggled in history, geography, and those kinds of things. So I think my affinity for math led me to wanting to track dollars and cents, I guess, and always liked to build things with my hands. So one of the early jobs I got was a plant controller at a manufacturing operation. And that just, I really enjoyed that, learning, how to track product costs and really help the company understand where the money was going so that we could make decisions that took the company further in a positive way.
Yeah, so that's actually really interesting that you said that about kind of like the numerical aspect of it, because for me, like I kind of had some difficulty with, was I going to go into accounting, was I going to go into marketing, business management, administration? So it's kind of interesting to see how your experience kind of early on inspired you to go into a certain area. And so I was thinking about these, how you all had these initial experiences early on and how they led you to where you are today. And I was wondering, how has your current role changed from the role that you first had when you entered the professional world? And kind of also along those lines, how was that like first professional experience you had, whatever job that was, kind of crucial to like getting those life skills, those job skills, helping you get into a different job now?
I'm happy to start. I don't know if we're going in order, if we're going to jump around, but maybe to start on your last question, as I started at the Red Sox, I started as an intern, and I kind of always reference this to some of the younger members on my team now, is I did pretty much anything and everything, from picking up trash in the ballpark to delivering tickets to, fans, to meeting with players and, giving tours of the ballpark. It really kind of runs the gamut, but I felt like what was so useful about that internship opportunity is you can really make it your own. You can demonstrate that you are dedicated and willing to really do anything. And I feel like that allowed me at least, and hopefully allows others to kind of have that platform to be like, oh, she's a hard worker. She's really willing to go above and beyond. And that, I was really lucky to be able to be offered a job after my internship. To your first question, which was about kind of how my role has changed, I feel so fortunate that I get to work in an industry that is always changing, particularly as far as digital media, social media. It changes every day. And I always like to say that, every day I feel like my job is a little bit different, and that's fun to me. That keeps me engaged and excited. I think it's been really interesting from a marketing perspective, specifically, to be able to evolve with our consumers and with the way digital media and just media in general has changed. And that's kind of allowed me to shape my career and my progression at Puma specifically. I started in a very specific digital production role in which I was creating, digital assets. I was working with the website, and having kind of that foundation in digital marketing allowed me to then grow, build out the entire social media team on a global basis. And now I oversee all of our communications. So it's kind of allowed me to have those stepping stones, which I think has been really nice. Hopefully that answered your questions.
Yes, of course. No, that did. I was just really curious because I know, like, especially at the high school and college, especially for me, looking like getting into internships and kind of seeing how that experience will really help you later on. So I think that's a great perspective. Yeah. So let's move on.
I can go.
Ross. Oh, or Taeyang, feel free to go ahead.
Sure. Yeah. If we're just continuing that order, I started with Harbor Freight Tools for Schools at the very beginning. So I was there at the startup phase for this foundation effort. So the first couple days or first couple months, we're just exploring, like doing a lot of research, being flexible, and just, being willing to collaborate and open to whatever experiences as we got this foundation effort going. But, for me, again, as a former teacher, what I brought to the team was a perspective of what teachers really needed, that teacher voice and understanding what students in the classroom and teachers in the classroom are going through on a daily basis. And that's what I brought to the team. And, as we, shaped what we were interested in supporting and giving to, that voice and perspective was really, really crucial. So my job it started evolving, my role, because of the nature of our startup effort, but it was always with the mindset and perspective, the needs of teachers at the very center.
Thank you for sharing that. It sounds, really like, I just love hearing about that education, kind of like, who are you really doing it for? So I think that's also another really great perspective as well. So let's actually change up the order slightly. So how about if we could have Ross go ahead. I believe that was not the order, but correct me if I'm wrong.
You want me to answer the question?
Yes.
Okay, great. We'll I'll start with I joined the military out of high school to go to school. I went to the Air Force Academy, and so part of those experiences of a highly challenging academic environment, a highly challenging military training environment for 4 years, just kind of they call that a leadership laboratory. It's not just academics, it's not just military training, it's not just the athletics that you have to, the fitness aspect of it. It's kind of the balance of both, and the idea being that you get enough thrown at you that you learn to prioritize, you learn what you're not going to be able to accomplish and have to find a way to be comfortable with that, and what you can accomplish, because rarely is it something you can certainly in that training environment and school environment that you're going to be able to get done. And so it teaches you to be able to adapt, to be able to balance a lot, and then it teaches you how to connect and delegate and work as a team. And so those are all really great skills to develop and really hone at the academy. But the nature of the way military assignments go is I don't do any single job for a long period of time. I didn't come in at the ground floor and start as a janitor and work my way up. I came in, I have a core career field, but you bounce around to a couple different assignments to develop kind of a well-rounded experience so that you can apply it at a couple different levels. And so, what I learned from a weapon system production line or research and development of radar weapon systems to a comm system to marketing is just the different skill sets needed of project management and tracking, and then kind of understanding how that plays in the bigger picture geopolitical landscape of the military, and ultimately laddering up to the world, right? I mean, you have presidents that change, you have global landscapes that change all the time, and so that there's a constant balance. You have budgets that change, and that all impacts, especially as you're trying to concentrate on being a good steward of the taxpayer dollar, because it's your money, it's my money, it's our tax dollars that go towards some of these budgets and these projects. And you don't want wasteful or frivolous spending, but you want to protect the interests of the nation. And so from that, things have changed. I would just say seeing the transition to a much more digital environment as the engagement program manager, engagement marketing lead for the Air Force, what used to be a one-on-one engagement, and seeing that transition to a virtual engagement. You're no longer on the same physical location, you're in the same virtual location, and how to connect with potential applicants so that they're making a commitment or want to consider joining the military or joining the Air Force is much different than the sale of a Coca-Cola or buying a pair of shoes. It's a much longer term decision. And so as that landscape changes, still finding ways to connect and communicate and do that in an appropriate and a safe place so that your message can be heard, but also understood and considered in a real world experience, and not via just the way it's seen from an outside perspective of like a video game or something. So I would say that's a big challenge. And then adding COVID on top of that even extends that gap between a person-to-person connection even further.
Yeah, that's definitely a different perspective, and I think that's really a good point, especially for the students. Kind of what Anne had said earlier about that internship, getting that experience in a lot of different areas, it sounds like can really help you, especially as things are changing, especially with COVID, understanding how to adapt. And that's, one of SkillsUSA's essential elements is adaptability, flexibility. So really understanding how to change can really, it sounds like, really help you in the workforce. So yeah,
Absolutely.
let's move on to Hans for your perspective on this question.
So I guess the first question you asked was how has how has the current role changed, relative to when I first entered the workforce? And I guess I would say, like so many disciplines, technology has had a huge impact on the workplace. And in the finance and accounting world, it's really no exception. What used to take a month to close the books on the previous month before you could, generate, financial results, etc. The expectations in, today's world are you should do it in a couple days. And what used to be paper files filled in file cabinets is now, electronic images, stored in the cloud. So I think technology has increased the level of expectations on accounting and financial departments to get information quickly and accurately. But I think also to fine tune that financial data such that it's no longer acceptable just to have overall results for an organization like, we made X amount of money. You have to be able to parse that information out into geographic territories, product lines, segments, business segments, that kind of thing, because everybody, the hunger for information has just increased with technology. Your other question about how my first professional experience affected me down the road. I was very fortunate, I think, because as I said earlier, my first professional experience was really in a manufacturing operation. And it's not too many times there aren't too many companies out there where at the front door, they're taking in raw materials, and then on the other side, turning out finished product. And that experience in terms of accounting for all of that gave me tools that I'll use for the rest of my life, because the financial analysis that goes into making products in a manufacturing operation, evaluating whether you should automate product lines, putting robots in to replace, manual labor, all those kind of considerations just sharpened and the skills used in analysis that I've used ever since, even outside of manufacturing.
Yeah, that's also that's really interesting to hear about all those different processes, because I never really realized, I think about in marketing, you have the different marketing plans you'll create and there's all these steps, but I never really thought about how in finance there's also a lot of steps that might happen as well, and then technology can really help speed that up, whether we have TurboTax for taxes, a lot of other different technology that can really help things. One thing that I noticed, there's actually a question here in the chat. Oh, looks like it's already answered. Okay.
I've answered a couple, but I'm just answering because one was addressed to me and I answered the other one.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, of course. I'd like to get the perspective then from the other panelists. This is a really good question because we're kind of talking about, technology is changing. How do we adapt to the changing world? And so this question was, what would you look for in a new hire in your business sector? Like what skills, habits, or activities in a resume would you want? So let's start with Hans.
Good question. I mean, the obvious one that people always think of are, do I have the specific skills required to do the job? But as someone who's interviewed a lot of people and looked at a lot of resumes in my time, I think having those skills on the resume probably gets you through the first filter of resume review. But what's going to get you the job is communication skills, personality, accomplishments, both professional and personal. I think the interviewer is most often trying to figure out what kind of person am I talking to? And are they open-minded? Are they trainable? Are they adaptable? Is it somebody that I'd like to have a beer with, because they're easy to talk with? To me, those are the kind of personal skills that really should be honed to have successful interviews.
Sounds like there are a lot of those actually are on the SkillsUSA framework. So it's really cool to hear that, and how the framework was developed was basically from employers and saying what they look for in students and communication, and all those different elements. Let's move on. Thank you. Let's move on to Ross.
Can you repeat the question just so I answer it?
Yeah, of course. Let me pull it up here.
Directly?
So what would you look for in a new hire in your business sector? So like what skills, habits, or activities in a resume would you want?
I think Hans really summarized it pretty good. You've got the core skill set that gets your resume onto the pile for review. And then when you make it to interview, you're competing to get to the interview stage. You've got the skill sets needed on paper to do the job. It then becomes, I want to know how somebody is going to be on a team. Are they going to be somebody that high tide raises all boats kind of thing? I'm going to look for someone that has the ability to work through different problems, work with a team, accomplish objectives, and sometimes I almost want that out of the box perspective. If I've got a certain job and these certain skill sets make great for this job, as long as the person's got those core skill sets, I may want somebody that maybe doesn't have any related experience because they're going to bring a different viewpoint. And so a lot of it just has to do, from my perspective, of how that person's going to be able to work on a team, work through challenges, and understand how past challenges will help them and experiences be able to be put in place and used to overcome any challenges that they face.
That's another great perspective too on the teamwork aspect. So that, understanding how well you're able to work in a team. It also sounds like, well-rounded is important as well. Maybe, having those skills, but then kind of the personality aspect as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of that overall skill set, especially the position's going to be a little bit dependent on how you're hiring. But yeah, really it comes down to, as Hans said, the ability to have a beer with that person, or, be able to work together on a team and the team be stronger because of it. That's really one of the key things that I look for.
Yeah, let's hear perspective from Tay. Would you like me to repeat the question?
No, I got it.
Okay.
I think, everything that both Hans and Ross have said is 100% accurate. I would say if there's anything to add is, we're living in a, Zoom world right now. I work from home. The rest of our team works from home. So I would say the ability to work independently, right? And, to be able to have that examples of like times you've worked independently, like there's no, right? Like I don't have, my manager, my boss looking over my shoulder to see that I'm making sure that I do it. I have to prove that I've done it, over and over again. So like the ability to work independently is a critical skill right now. And then also, critical thinking, right? The ability to kind of, as they said, like see a problem, like work the different angles or see the different, see different perspectives and come up with solutions, especially in the world we're living in right now. So yeah, I would say the two skills on top of everything else, my colleagues have said is, ability to work independently. And then 2 is critical thinking.
Yeah, I was thinking, about working independently, and also another perspective that we heard was working in a team. And I actually just had a question about that. So I know with COVID, everything's online. I was curious to see how you all are adapting to this change, and how are you able to, whether it's working in a team, working individually, what are you doing to adapt and kind of continue that productivity and maintain those relationships? Because, for example, for us national officers, we haven't been able to meet in person, but we're still able to have that teamwork aspect and that like camaraderie. So how are you all managing that?
I'll take this first, right? Like I think, our team has been throughout the years has always met on Tuesday at 10 a.m. every week, right? That's always kind of been our set time. And even in this pandemic world, we've stuck with that, right? And then, so that's when we get a lot of our business done. But then on Fridays at like noon or 1 o'clock, we kind of just check in on each other, right? It's like we don't really talk about work. We just talk about what's going on personally, and then just to use like 30 minutes to an hour of that time to talk about what's gone well this week, what's going on with the family. So that's been really critical for us too, just to remind ourselves of all the difficulties that people have. There's a lot of perks of working from home, but at the same time, there's other challenges, right, that have risen up. So definitely setting, like, no matter what, always having that time and meeting at specific times, whether for business or for personal check-ins.
So sticking to a plan and being consistent. Great pieces of advice. Let's move on to, actually, I'll leave it open if you all would like to just jump in. I think that might make things a little bit easier.
I guess I would agree with everything that's been said. I think what my experience has been since March of this year, when the pandemic hit us. I think we've realized how much we can do virtually, and how powerful something like Zoom is to keep relationships alive and fresh. I mean, the client that I'm working with most right now, we have multiple Zoom calls a week with the management team, just to give, and it doesn't have to be a long call, it's just quick updates to keep the FaceTime going and keep everybody in front of each other. So you keep the relationships going and you make sure you're on top of what everyone else is doing.
Also sounds like a consistency there in those meetings. So is that like meetings with like a partner, or you said you were meeting with somebody, like weekly Zoom meetings? Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so the CEO of the company that I'm working for right now has a management team that reports to her, and it's about 10 people. So we keep those managers on Zoom calls like 2 or 3 times a week. We have a scheduled call, and it's just, we go around the horn, everyone gives an update as to what they're working on, what challenges they have, any updates, new contract wins, or whatever the case may be. And as long as you keep that going every week, it really helps you keep momentum going. And it really, I think, minimizes the loss of not being in person.
Of course, yeah, developing relationships is really important, being able to continue those meetings as well. Let's move on. I'll leave it to Anne or Ross if you'd like to answer.
Yeah, sure. So Puma, given its global nature, I regularly work with people around the world, particularly with a number of folks in Germany, which is where our headquarters are. So we have a huge office there. And normally I travel to Germany 4 times a year for these big meetings, seasonal meetings that we have. All of those meetings were forced to be virtual, which honestly, maybe to Hans's point a little bit, was a lot easier than I think anyone really anticipated, given the way technology has been so advanced and has kind of adapted with us. And I feel like now, like, yes, there's still time zones, but now we're kind of all on equal ground. And given the global nature of my work, it actually has helped in a lot of ways, because now we're just like all on video calls. Everyone, whether you're in Chile or Germany or the US, like, it's all kind of the same. So I do think that that's one value. Another thing that has been interesting is the ways in which I'm working. So we're a very meeting and email based company. I feel like half of my work is done via text message now. I know that that's maybe a little bit of a nuance, but it's interesting that, like, given the pandemic, we've adapted and our communication avenues have shifted a little bit. My social media folks, we like talk exclusively in Instagram message, because that's just like where everything is happening. So we've kind of found other ways in which to communicate, which, if that's a silver lining, then fine. I personally am ready to get back into the office, but we've at least adapted.
Yeah, once again, that adaptability, flexibility, and it almost sounds like you've really kind of looked at the positive side of things, which is something I think a really important lesson for all the students is, you have to be in a completely different scenario, but how do you adapt and how do you continue making sure business is conducted well? Thank you. Let's move on to Ross.
No, I think my colleagues covered it greatly. They did a great job. Just to offer a different perspective for the sole purpose of offering a different perspective, I'll talk a little bit about the challenges, a little bit more on, from the government perspective. You have classification issues. So you can't just hop on Google or Zoom or Instagram chat. Not saying that those aren't great platforms. Sometimes, depending on the content and the matter of which it relates to national security, there are some significant communication challenges associated with it, and it just took a well thought out a plan on how to get back into the office if that's the only medium at which some of that stuff can be handled, and how to social distance, how to protect yourself, how to protect others, understanding, being vocal about higher risk if you are higher risk, and the trust to have leadership and commanders and organizations that would respect that and find workarounds. And I think everybody, the U.S. in general has done a very good job of working hard to stay connected, stay social distance. I know you have political opinions across the spectrum, but on the grand scheme of things, a very challenging situation across the business environment. And I feel like businesses have been able to fluctuate and do the things that all my panelists here have talked about, and move to a virtual environment and be set up and be very successful. And it takes a strong person to be able to vocalize where their challenges exist, and a strong team and leadership to be able to overcome those challenges. And so I'm glad everybody really touched on those different aspects.
Yeah, and I'm sure that, sorry, go ahead, Ann.
Sorry, I was just going to say one more thing I was going to add that's maybe builds upon that is we've seen our business change quite drastically, honestly, not only from a huge focus going from owned and operated retail stores, because for a long time across the globe, people weren't going into stores, to our e-commerce business. So a lot of kind of resources and time and energy was shifted to support our owned and operated .com business. But then also just the way in which we had to shift budgets and accommodate to the change of consumer habits through COVID was also very interesting. The year of 2020, the projection, not only from a business standpoint, but from a communication and marketing standpoint, changed dramatically. People working out at home, people not playing sports in the same way that they typically were. So we had to adjust the way we were marketing our products, and just sport in general differently, which speaks to some of this adaptability. And certainly, Ross, to your point, presented a lot of issues. But I do think, this is the nature now of how things are going to be, and adjusting and adapting is certainly an important thing for all of us.
Yeah, thank you for adding that. And that actually brings up kind of a similar question to the rest of the panelists. How have you had to adapt your business strategy, whether it was like marketing or is your operations? I'm really curious to see, because Ann provided a really great example of how, everything going online rather than those retail stores. Now they have to do everything online. So I'm really curious to hear, just, from a marketing perspective, business management, operations, that kind of thing.
I'll jump in here, I guess. So what it's done in my world is it's put a lot more focus and pressure on your ability to forecast what's going to be happening going out, because traditionally in an established business you can always lean on history to help you forecast what's going to happen. With COVID, it kind of takes that away, because what's happened over the last 12 months, doesn't mean anything when you're in a pandemic kind of environment. So what it means is you have to get your management team together and really almost treat it like a startup, in terms of, we have to figure out what revenue is solid, what we can count on, what's going away, what's being impacted. We have to work on aligning our expenses to meet whatever that new revenue forecast is going to be. And we have to do a lot of sensitivity analysis, because there's a lot of what ifs involved with a situation like we're in right now. You know, what if the biggest customer we have goes under? And so you have to do those sensitivity analyses, so you have plans. If this happens, here's what we're going to do. And the pressure has intensified on those kind of analytics, I think.
For us in philanthropy, right, in our team, I would say we've had to kind of get rid of what we cling to, right? Well, we've always, the mentality of, this is how we've always done things, so that's how we got to do it. And we've had to get rid of that mindset and perspective in order to move forward. And I think in a lot of ways that's worked out well for us. Like, for example, our foundation likes to celebrate teachers in person, right? We give out a prize of more than $1 million to 18 teachers. And we like to have these 18 surprise celebrations all at once. Obviously we couldn't do that this year, right? We couldn't go into schools, we couldn't meet in person, but instead we've done these kind of Zoom celebrations. And it's been great because teachers get to share, right, the link with their family and friends across the country and across the world. So we've had these, like, instead of just like these narrow school celebrations, we've now going to expand our celebrations to include people from, you know, all across the world celebrating this one teacher. So that's getting rid of that kind of sacred cow mindset, or what we cling to, has really freed us up and provided new avenues of surprise and celebration for us.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't interrupting Ross if he was planning on talking. No, I think that's a great perspective. It's I know, like, especially with when you're doing things online, being able to like share the link and being able to kind of like bring everybody together in a community. I think that's really a great way of kind of like spreading the message, and then kind of bringing everyone together when normally only maybe like maybe only some people could be there. So now you almost can like be adaptable and bring a lot of people together. So that's a great point. Ross? Oh, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, for us, it came down to delivery of the storytelling. And that's really what it boiled down to, because everything that we do in Air Force recruiting is about putting the next generation of great airmen into the Air Force. And it doesn't matter, how they serve, whether that's civilian or Guard or reserve or active duty, in and out of uniform, doesn't matter. Weaving that storytelling together to show that you think of fighting your nation's wars, protecting its freedoms. That's what comes to mind when you think of service in the military, service in the Air Force. But we also attack the pandemic. It's a military-led effort for how distribution, the logistics of getting out the possible vaccine. That's being led by a 2-star general and his logistics team. If it's delivering internet capability to less fortunate economic situation areas, and understanding how to provide those connectivities so kids can still go to school. Earthquake, hurricane, you name it, those type of pandemic or disaster relief is something that the military, the Guard, the Reserve specialize in, the Air Force specialize in. And so it was telling that story, and then making sure that it's not just a war or solving some geopolitical problem. It's service to your country in any way called upon. And so you have the storytelling shift to more of humanitarian, And then on beyond that, I would say the delivery method, when you're experiential, the experience is more difficult when it's not face to face. And so we did some really cool things. We developed the world's largest puzzle. You know, when people were having to stay home, having to social distance, we looked for ways to encourage that and then also still deliver our message. And so I'm really proud of the effort the entire marketing team put forth to really kind of adjust and adapt. But that was kind of the big platform shift from face to face to digital technology, that kind of stuff.
I love that you brought up storytelling because, that's a really important aspect of marketing. And I really like to, I kind of like to hear from both you and Anne. We'll start with Anne first. But, what's the process that you use to create one of these marketing campaigns? Because we see these really, really awesome marketing campaigns on, and like advertisements, which I love watching just being a business major. But like, how do you come up with these creative ideas?
Yeah, sure. I would say that's definitely one of the fun parts of the job is kind of leaning into the creative aspect. I think first and foremost, we always start with a marketing objective, which typically stems from a business objective, whether it's, I'll give you an example. Like right now, we're really keen on getting into the women's space a little bit more. I would say about 5 years ago, when we signed Rihanna, we had a lot of heat and energy in the women's market, and it's kind of died down a little bit. So we are trying to re-energize what we're doing in the women's space, not only from a business standpoint, but also from a marketing standpoint. So we kind of we did some consumer research and strategy work around the female consumer in different markets, how it's evolved over the course of several years. There's kind of some really interesting tidbits around how purpose and causes are very important to a lot of female consumers right now, especially the younger demographics. And similarly, there's a lot less of this obsession about me. It's about we and a collective. And so I think we kind of got a couple of key insights, and then that delivered, okay, how do we build this out creatively? And we have an in-house creative team, over 50 people that sit in our Boston marketing headquarters. And their job is kind of deliver creative concepts that not only communicate our brand and what we're trying to say as a brand, but then also on a product level. And then that kind of gets brought down into each channel. We have channel experts, whether it's social media or PR and how we're going to tell the story, or in commercial marketing, how it's going to be brought to life in a store or online on a .com. And then we kind of go through the process of building it out across our channels. Of course, trying to always ladder back up to that marketing objective and ensuring that we're leaning into the channels that are most relevant to our consumers, primarily within the digital space. And then, of course, it goes without saying that we need to ensure that each market, that it's a business priority for each market, that we're, allocating budgets accordingly and making sure that we are prioritizing and spending against the things that are going to make money for the company. But that's kind of very top line how we go through a process. One interesting thing that our marketing team kind of says a lot is we always make a plan. You always need to have a plan, but the plan's probably going to change. So we always kind of develop that plan, but we have an assumption because our consumers are changing, because culture is changing. Puma is very much about the culture around sport. Because culture changes every day, we have to be willing and able to adapt with culture. And so I think that that's also something that's been interesting is have your plan. It's probably going to change, but at least we can evolve it rather than starting from scratch each time.
Real quickly, just to jump in there, I was really glad Anne said ladder up to those objectives, because I was going to say requirements tracing. It comes down from that requirement, that business objective, and then you slowly break that down into small enough pieces to where you can put some creative behind it. And you've got some decisions to make on what the medium is or what the space is for engagement. You know, everything can't just be a commercial or a sponsorship. You may get more ROI specifically, more return on investment specifically by going one method, but that can't be the only method for which you engage. And then specifically for the Air Force, ours is you know, we have to represent the country we serve. So, you know, I could do something and do an event in Florida, and I'm going to get a certain ROI out of it, just because of the space, number of people, climate, everything down there. Whereas I have to sometimes make strategic decisions and forcibly choose to do something in another location in the Northeast or something like that, because we have to recruit individuals from that perspective. And so there is a little bit of that give and take balance perspective, but definitely laddering up to objectives, tracing those requirements are all very important. And then you just get into the as Ann said, the fun part of kind of the creative spaghetti on the wall a little bit, and come up with some good ideas, and then kind of funnel through them. And I thought what she said about adaptability is very, very important. Landscapes change, things change that make you have to be able to adapt. But on top of that, I'll say this for everybody, both in your personal, but also in their professional lives. You have to have important core values and things that anchor what you do, both personally and your company. And if you're doing things based with that in mind, you're going to achieve your objectives, especially as things change and you might have to revector a little bit, but you don't want to be constantly changing that anchoring purpose of what you're there to do. That will get you in trouble of losing that brand connectivity, that brand identity. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. It's the reason we use, aim high. It's the reason we have our core value. Everything is geared towards that focus, and then we adjust as the landscape adjusts, but we don't go switching to a new overall company motto. And then I will say this from my experience with Puma as well, is that I think it's important to have a positive brand outlook. You don't see from a marketing perspective Puma's out there making bad marketing efforts to disparage Nike or Reebok or whatever, right? They're very pro their brand, and that's awesome. That's not a negative perspective. I think that's really important too. Same for the Air Force. We're not out there saying Army or Navy or Marines or Coast Guard are bad. Those are our brothers and sisters in arms, and I think it's important to maintain that positive message, because on the whole, I think that's something that the majority of people would rather see, rather than some sort of negative back and forth. That's it, my 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think you brought up core values. That's actually something I was recently learning about in one of my business classes. You can adapt, but you need to make sure you're not like completely doing 180, because everybody needs to know who you are, whether you're a for-profit, nonprofit. You need to have that clear. Everyone recognizes you, basically understands who you are as a company or as a nonprofit. And so as we kind of close out the session today, and I wish I had time for more questions, because I love really getting into learning about the business side and all that. But as we close today, I'd love to just hear some like parting words. If you all would have any advice for the students, like if you could just give them like one piece of advice on what they should do now to take next steps to reaching their desired career, what would those next steps be?
I have 2 things I would say. First and foremost, I wouldn't unless you want to become a doctor or a lawyer, I wouldn't put so much pressure on yourself in terms of your education of like, this is exactly what I want to do, and so I'm going to take all of the courses in order to achieve that. I feel like, yes, education is extremely important. It's the foundation of everything that we do, but your experience, and I saw a question on this, your experience really is so important in allowing you to continue to grow. I personally, from a college standpoint, I got a liberal arts degree. It wasn't specialized in anything. I felt like it allowed me to have analytical skills. I was a good writer, a good collaborator, a good teammate. Some of these kind of more soft skills are really important in setting you up for your career, wherever that may be. So I feel like that's just an important thing, is not putting so much pressure on yourself as to like, what does that need to be? And then the other thing I would say is just, hard work really does go a long way, and being hungry and making sure that the people around you know that, can I help? What can I do to help? I feel like allows you to stand above others, and is always something that managers notice. So.
I'll jump in here and maybe just echo what Ann said there. Someone I worked for several years ago once told me, the harder you work, the luckier you get. And I think it's so true. And it might sound obvious in one sense, but I think it speaks volumes. People generally just aren't lucky. It's that they work at something. They're disciplined about it. They take it seriously, and it pays off. And it's oftentimes referred to as luck, but the harder you work, the luckier you get. I think, and the same gentleman, by the way, that I worked for, I'll just throw this out there. It's kind of related, but maybe not. I don't know. But for what it's worth, he and I were going to a social event one time that was kind of a business event, but it was socially. It was like a business development kind of happy hour kind of thing. And I asked him. I said, Mike, how do we dress for this thing? And he said, well, Hans, you never look bad looking good. And the point there was, why not look good if you have the opportunity? Because like he said, you never look bad looking good. I'll leave you with that.
That's great advice. Yeah, so if you can buy a tuxedo or a ball gown, definitely go for it. But I would say for me, kind of have an attitude to continuously learn and constantly learn, whether that's reading books, listening to podcasts, having conversations, right? Like just be open to whatever conversations and, discussions, and anything it can teach you, right? Anything can be a teaching or learning moment. So having that kind of disposition for that to, you never know when something you read in a book or listen to a podcast or even learn in a TikTok will pay off, right? So like just constantly immersing yourself around that. And then two, I would say decisions are made by those who show up, right? And, just constantly showing up, and by you being part of this conversation today, you're showing up, by your participation in SkillsUSA, you're showing up. So just, and then you'll be able to get to decide for yourself where you want to go in your career and in your own life. So yeah, so constantly learn, and decisions are made by those who show up. And thanks for having me here today.
Yeah, the whole panel hit it all nail on the head. The only thing I can add is to be uncompromising in your moral and ethical character. No matter what you do, I don't care if it's school, I don't care if it's job, it doesn't matter. Just never compromise at that. That is the one thing you will keep and take everywhere you go. And it's the one thing that's probably the easiest to lose rather quickly. And so just never compromise that, and do all the other things that the panelists said. You're gonna be very successful.
Well, panelists, thank you so much for your time today and your investment in the future of the business management administration marketing point, as well as students like me. I Once again, I really enjoyed getting to talk to professionals in my area of interest, because I learned so much. Just really, really helped me out too. So just like having the opportunity to learn more about an area of interest has also helped these students here today. Really want to thank the students as well for being here. I hope that everybody learned something new today, whether you're a student attending or the panelists as well. I'm sure we all learned some stuff from each other as too. I really like the point about the importance of, sticking to your core values and, staying true to yourself. That's, and also just the fact of, really being open to trying new things. I think adapting to changes in today's world, we need to understand how do we take advantage of that and be open to new opportunities. So after you leave the session today, take some time to reflect on what you have learned today and write down 2 steps that you can take to further prepare yourself for your desired career. Also, be sure to engage on the SkillsUSA Connect Career Cluster forum and take a look at the panel discussion videos that will be posted after the event. Once again, thank you to the panelists and the students for being here today, and I wish you all the best on taking the next steps toward achieving your future career.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.